Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Christensen,
I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 32 of
Don't Die Dumb.
We have a special guest with us today. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Annie Davis Kareem. I'm a friend of Coffee's and I'm a new friend of Pete's. I work in clinical research and I'm excited to be here with you guys.
I'm
No.
glad you mentioned your credits because having us for friends gives you no credibility whatsoever.
My favorite topics are science and medicine, and they're also my most comfortable topics. And Annie is more expert than me in both of those areas. She's a pharmacological researcher. So we're really glad to have her today.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I want to start with our mail. In our mail, we got hate mail. One for me, one for you.
Score.
Split right down the middle. Now, we also got mail that was constructive, some that was complimentary, and some that had good ideas for topics. And we'll get to some of those. First, let's address your hate mail.
Great.
And I'm going to clean this up. This was full of four-letter
It
words.
was the kind of hate mail that a sixth grader would write on the wall of a bathroom. So we're going to make this guy sound a lot more grown up than he is.
Okay.
So you're welcome.
Coffee, you mentioned what you claim is toxic masculinity. Both you and Pete are a couple of wussies. And God darn it, you two a-holes are a couple of wimps. You're trying to vaginize manhood. Your response to that?
So I am sorry that you're afraid of women. I get it. A lot of guys are. I actually went to the trouble of making a chart of the difference between toxic and masculine and positive masculinity. So I do believe in positive masculinity. What's the difference? Well, toxic masculinity is looks maxing. Suppose I had told you a year ago that a guy who looks like a Ken doll or an AI generated human being was going to convince you to pound on your own face with a hammer in order to look better. You would say, "No way, I'm falling for that, bro." And then clavicular comes along and you guys are pounding on your face with a hammer to make your cheekbones more prominent, okay? So looks maxing is kind of a toxic masculine thing. Competence is how real men make themselves more attractive. And they're not just more attractive to women, they're more attractive to their family, they're more attractive to society. Toxic masculinity is what can I get? Positive masculinity is what can I contribute? Who have I helped today? What have I built? What will I leave behind that makes the room a little better than when I entered it? Toxic middle school mentality. Hence this letter that we had to actually make sound more grown up than it was. We brought it all the way up to like a 12-year-old level, okay? A positive
You're not going to win them
masculinity
over saying
is
things
you
like
stop
that.
sounding 12 when you're 13, and you keep growing from there, okay? Toxic masculinity, love is based on desire. My woman, I want this person. Oh, I want you so badly, baby. Positive masculinity is that the object of your love, their happiness is essential to your own. If they're not happy, you're not happy. Is that what you mean when you use the word love? Or do you just mean want, like when you were a little kid grabbing for an extra dessert plate? A toxic male scores women. A positive male respects women. I get it. You find them intimidating and weird and mysterious. Do you know why they're intimidating and weird and mysterious? Because they have minds and personal agendas and thoughts, something you could aspire to. Toxic masculinity wants to fight, never mind why. But positive masculinity wants to protect. A positive male is a guardian. He puts himself at risk for things that are more important than himself. A toxic male puts himself at risk to show off or to build his reputation, but not for anything important. Toxic masculinity demands respect. Positive masculinity earns respect. To a toxic male, money is an end, but to a grown-up male, money is a means to an end, ends that are actually purposeful and valuable in some way. A toxic male optimizes himself for gold diggers, gold chains and fancy clothes and a sports car, and chases women, but he optimizes for gold diggers or submissives. And who does he meet? Gold diggers and submissives. So what does he think women are like? gold diggers and submissives, right? But a real man optimizes for personal integrity and efficacy, and that guy finds a partner in the world. And here I speak from experience. I'm the greatest partner ever. Toxic masculinity values muscles for show. They watch workout videos and go to the gym and take steroids in order to fill up a t-shirt. But a grown-up male builds strength in order to use it as an instrument to accomplish his goals and values. A toxic male values himself for how he is seen. A mature male values himself for how he sees. What are his insights? And a toxic male is looking to scam the world. A grown-up, positive male values integrity. So when I talk about toxic masculinity, I'm not dissing masculinity. I'm dissing a 12-year-old boy's idea of masculinity.
I don't want to say you went on long, but that's all the time we have for this week. I'm teasing you, of course.
Timing was such that I just happened to hit right with that.
Your thoughts?
There's a lot of focus on masculinity sort of being downplayed and disadvantaged lately, and I think that speaks to why it's a much more complex issue than it's generally given credit for.
Yeah.
I understand the feeling that males are falling behind in things like school and things like college, but looking at the larger picture and the larger ecosystem, which is what I think you're doing there, gives you a very different picture.
If girls are catching up to us, the answer is not to trip them on the field, it's to run faster.
I think that one of the reasons men think they're falling behind is because women are getting better jobs and are more present. You see them on TV, you see them in the movies with powerful positions. There's no reason that should scare you. You should say, well, good. Why doesn't Major League Baseball let women play? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's no reason. There's a woman who would tour the country. Her name, and I'm not, is Misty Hyman. And she was married to a baseball player from the Arizona Diamondbacks. She struck out more major leaguers underhand with a softball than most pitchers. It was amazing, but they wouldn't put her in. This fear of women is confounding to me at times.
Yeah, I mean, if they really can't do it, then they'll lose in an open competition. And if they really can, good for them. So I don't really understand why men want to hold women back. That is not the way to pull ourselves forward. The way to pull ourselves forward is to just each of us be responsible for ourselves and try harder.
Now, the hate mail that was directed at me, this guy did research, so I applaud him for that. Pete, I looked you up, and you are a member of the leftist Democratic Party, and you're pushing for Deb Haaland for governor, a Democrat. And then it went on to point out every racial slur, really demeaning things about this poor woman.
I bet you that person would be offended if we called him a racist.
Well, I almost don't know how to respond to that. Look at her as a candidate, not as a Native American or, a minority. Why would that be prevalent over her qualifications? What is the deal with that? And yeah, I'm guilty. I am working for the Democratic Party, but I'm not putting down any Hispanic candidate that has to be running as well. There's no reason for that. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? No, I'm on my own. Okay, now I need some help.
We agree with him. We totally agree with the hate mail.
Concur.
I need some help, and they turn into deaf
So
mutes.
my argument against racism isn't actually a moral argument. We've talked.
Yeah. Yeah.
We work on ethics together, actually. And one of the things that a kind of mantra for me is, can't you see how right I am, is not an argument. So I'm not going to make a moral argument against racism, although I do think it's immoral. It's also stupid.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about someone if I tell you their race, okay? If I tell you I'm going to bring my friend over, my black friend over, what have I told you about my friend? Almost nothing, except that when we get out of the car, you can tell which of us is which, okay? What do I care about when you bring your friend over to meet me? Are they smart? Are they funny? Can I trust them? Are they honest? Do they have integrity? Their color doesn't tell me anything about that. And by the way, people who use the word racial purity should realize that's pretty close to inbreeding.
Very good. Now, here's a subject that's more on both of your lines of mine. Autism. This was a question. It used to be, it was 1 in 1,000 were diagnosed with autism. Now it's 1 in 40. Can you explain that? And is there some underlying reason we should know about?
I think there are so many answers to that question that it's hard to even know where to start. I mean, there's the obvious answer about diagnosis and the fact that the diagnostic criteria has changed so much over time. There's certainly an argument to be made that level 1 autism and level 3 autism are really, we're talking about two very different things. But I also think I think there's a sort of mating issue. Just the idea that people are, there's the idea of broader autistic phenotype, the idea that people maybe not be diagnosable as autistic, but may have autistic traits, and that those people who have broader autistic phenotype, autistic traits, are more likely to pair up and have children together, and to consequently, because so much of autism is genetic, have children that have autism that is diagnosable.
So like people find each other, and
Yes.
that can lead to an exaggeration of autistic genes.
Yes, and I think like people find each other more now than.
Though I will say, I'm not
last.
sure there is more autism. The diagnostic criteria have broadened so much, and so many people now have a secondary interest in having themselves or a family member labeled as autistic, or a student within a school system. We've talked about this before. There's actually like money to be had if you can identify autistic kids in your schools. So between a vastly broader diagnostic landscape and bounty hunters, or people who have, like for example, my child isn't getting C's because I don't make them do their homework, or my child isn't getting C's because they're average. That's what C is supposed to mean. No, my child is getting C's because they're autistic. It's not their fault, and it's certainly not my fault, right? If we just lean into the C's and say, how can I help my kid get B's and A's, you wouldn't have to answer those questions. So there are so many other reasons for people to be diagnosed as autistic. I don't know whether it's increased or not. But if it has, it certainly hasn't increased by the astronomical numbers people think it has.
Certainly.
Okay, now I hear people use this statement, they throw this around, well, they're on the scale, that person's on the scale. What is the scale?
The spectrum, the autism spectrum.
So what does it go like, 1 to 100, 1 to 10? Explain it to me so the layman can understand, please.
So I talked a minute ago about level 1 and level 3 autism. It's just the idea that autism ranges from a disability that stops communication entirely, at least verbal communication, to someone who's quirky and maybe does some stimming, and I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but it's a huge spectrum.
So it's about higher functioning, is that it?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Coffee, what do you think?
Bring it down to street level.
So
for
when I
poor
say
Pete.
autism community,
Yeah.
I mean the people who have it, but also their parents, their kin, their teachers. Almost all of us are affected in some way by somebody with autism. Not necessarily always for the worst. Asperger's used to be lumped in with autism, and it's actually high-functioning Asperger's is not a bad thing to have. It's more neurovariant than neuropathologic. But to say that there's a saying in the autism community that if you've met one autistic, you've met one autistic, one person with autism. They wouldn't say autistic, they'd say a person with autism. I misspoke there, I apologize. And, you know, orange and blue are on a spectrum, but you wouldn't mistake them for each other. To say that there's a spectrum and all these different things are on autism is making the word blurrier and blurrier. It used to have a much more specific meaning, which is, I think, what you were getting at.
Yes.
And now that it has much less of a specific meaning, in 1950, if I had said my son has autism, everybody would know what that meant.
Yep.
If I say it today, it's just an opening for 3 or 4 pages of explanation about what's different about my son than your son.
Let me say this, I can tell both of you are somewhat, in my opinion, uncomfortable with this because you want to tell the truth, but you don't want to accidentally offend anybody. And that's because you're both sincere people and you care about other people. So it's
Because
a
we're
hard...
wussies.
Yes, it's
Well,
true.
I am.
So, stop it. But don't do that when I'm being serious. No, so it's a hard subject to breach with other people. You don't know what's going to offend them and what isn't.
It is. There are a lot of nerve endings around autism or any other thing like that. Even people who are left-handed can be sensitive to discussions about it. And, one of the things that people on the right like to do is say, well, everybody on the left is so sensitive about so many things. Like, not like us. We're not sensitive at all, which is kind of hilarious. But the point is, we don't all have the same buttons and we don't all have the same sensitivity levels. Mm-hmm. I know for a fact that there's some types of pain that I can take at much higher levels than other people around me can. There are a couple that I'm low threshold for, like my hand in the ice water bucket, for example. That's a real difficult one for me. But sewing up my own wounds is something I've done all my life. So do I have a high pain threshold or a low pain threshold? It depends on the topic. Are you sensitive or are you tough? Well, it depends on the topic, doesn't it? Yeah. And families are, of course, sensitive about their family members. They should be.
They should be. And autism is a really tough one. Autism is a really sensitive subject, and I think you can say a lot of things about it that are true without fully answering that question.
Mm-hmm. Now back up the bus a minute. You sewed up your own wounds?
I'm not sure that was actually the theme. Yeah, I've done it lots of times.
I sewed up this with a needle and thread.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it hurt like hell. It was horrible,
But on the other hand, there's a pretty good chance that if we did the ice water test, you'd be laughing at me. So
I don't know.
The point is that we're not like globally tough or globally sensitive. It's different buttons for different people. Yeah. And yeah, I do want to respect that. I don't want to go around just inflicting unnecessary pain on strangers. Yeah. And I don't feel bad about that.
So if you sat on a razor and cut your buttocks, you try and find the mirror and fix that?
No, for something I couldn't logistically get to, I'd go find somebody else and say, I'd stop some stranger in the street and say, hey, can you take a minute to sew up my butt? And they'd be like, excuse me?
Okay, I couldn't help it. It was too easy. Vitamin supplements. Okay, person asks, I find vitamin supplements confusing.
Yeah.
I can't afford to buy all my foods from Whole Foods or one of these other places. And I don't have the time to read nutrition facts on the back of a can or a box. What is more important? And what are the vitamins that are important for both a man and a woman to take? What's basic? And if you could also touch on what foods are basic, What do we absolutely need?
I don't think any vitamin supplements typically are necessary. And that's assuming that you eat a pretty typical diet that has reasonable macronutrients. I mean, I think sometimes people can be low in iron, people can be low in certain B vitamins if you're eating like a vegan diet, but most of the time I'd be more concerned with getting enough fiber than I would getting enough of.
Yeah, I went to the same place. Yeah. So if we broaden it to talk about supplements, I would say by a mile the most important dietary mistake that Americans make is not enough fiber. And most people think fiber is about pooping, but that's like saying a Rolex watch is a good paperweight. Fiber does an awful lot more than that. It lowers your cholesterol, it improves your gut microbiome, which in turn has endocrine effects, meaning hormones throughout your body that can make you function better and differently. Sleep better, less risk of cancer. It's an anti-cancer drug. Fiber is an anti-cancer drug. Fiber does a lot of really good things for you. And it helps you to not gain weight from the same general pile of food, from X amount of food that you'd eat in a day, you're less likely to gain fat if it's a high fiber diet than a low fiber diet.
Okay, so from the layman's point of view, if I get a loaf of wheat bread and have a salami and cheese sandwich, I'm eating good.
Better than if you had gotten white bread.
But no, not
Thanks
right.
for clearing that up.
Well,
No, I'm
processed
saying-
meats are one of the most carcinogenic foods, that is cancer-causing. Processed meats are one of the most cancer-causing foods available to us.
But
Alcohol,
aren't-
by the way, is also pro-cancer.
Aren't Americans hung up on red meat? I can't watch 5 minutes of TV without being broken in with a commercial about burgers or bacon.
So there's three kind of bandwidths on this. There's your caveman diet people who completely misunderstand the anthropology and have a completely fantasy view of cavemen. Okay. Then there's your plant-based diet people. I'm going to circle back to that because that's the same bandwidth. And then there's your vegans and vegetarians who think all meat is bad. And there are reasons, that's a defensible position, but from a nutritional standpoint, which I think is our topic right now, most nutritionists would say a few servings a week of meat are good. If you go around the world and survey people and say, if you go to like, trying to avoid the word third world, but poorer countries and developing nations, and say, what would you do if you had more income? The most common answer is, I'd buy more meat. But there are plenty of Americans who literally think there is only one food, dead animals, and everything else is garnish, right?
But if you are only
And that
eating,
is quite unhealthy. That's a cancer-prone diet. Go ahead.
but if you're only eating 3 days a week, don't you want meat because it takes a long time to digest?
Well, I'm sorry, did you want that?
No. I think that's a fair point. I think, yes, if your main goal is to stay full, perhaps that is what you want. But I don't think that's most Americans' main goal.
If the goal is to produce more food, meat would be the worst possible answer because it takes so many more acres to produce
Yeah,
a pound
yeah.
of meat than a pound of other plant-based proteins. And there are a lot of plant-based proteins that are as protein-dense as meat is. My pitch here is not you should all become vegetarian tomorrow. From a nutritional standpoint, I'm not saying that. As a physician, I am not saying that. What I am saying is that because a little is good doesn't mean a lot is better. That's been a recurring theme on our podcast, is that people think if a little of something is good, more of it is better. So most Americans should eat a lot less meat. But a plant-based diet is not a vegetarian diet. It's a diet in which the bulk of your calories are from plant-sourced foods. And most nutritionists would say 3 or 4 servings of meat a week is a good idea, maybe up to 5. But they wouldn't say meat at every meal, and meat should be like 90% of your calories and things like that. Meat doesn't have fiber in it. We just talked about its properties. Meat is highly associated with cholesterol and saturated fats, and meat often has a lot more, people talk about toxins all the time. Well, the way that we raise meat in America, the animals are fed inappropriate foods like corn-fed cattle. It's not what cattle eat in nature. And they're raised on hormones and antibiotics and so forth. So there's a lot of baggage that comes with meat. So little meat nutritionally, probably a good idea. A lot of meat nutritionally, bad idea. Zero meat nutritionally could be a good idea if you can afford to eat a healthy vegetarian diet. And I had wanted to come back to that. That one thing I've never yet had a chance to agree with RFK Jr., but this is our moment. RFK, you and me, we're like this. Because I do think that eating more plant-based whole foods, fresh foods, and even more fresh, unprocessed meats that are adequately cooked would be healthier for the American diet, but it's expensive. I eat that way, and I'm shocked at my own food bills.
That was their complaint. They can't afford to do that.
Yeah, it is
I
a
can't
problem.
afford to do this.
It should be cheaper to eat healthy than to eat poorly. But one of the reasons that people who are low income have such poor health in our country is they eat very low quality food because it's cheaper.
And it's cheaper in time also. I mean, it's very cheap to open a bag
can,
or a can or a box of something. If you want to make beans for dinner, it's certainly possible to do that very, very cheaply, but it's time intensive. And I think there's a tendency to mix up absence and presence when we're talking about these things. You're talking about the presence of a lot of meat. That's one issue, and then there's the other issue of sort of the absence of meat and the presence of a lot of whole foods and vegetables and whole grains. I think it's easy to get caught up with meat, yes or no, versus let's add some other things that are healthy in there.
Okay, so let me put you both on the spot separately. I'm going to ask you, and then I'll ask you. Tell me a meal that's well balanced, typical meal, a dinner.
Okay. I would probably start with like a side salad or something like that, like a really appealing side salad. I tend to. You're talking to some vegetarians here. I think it's part of the issue. But I can say this for anybody. A protein, for example, peanut butter. You could do tofu. You could do meat.
And tofu gets a bad rap.
Tofu does.
It's the butt of all kinds of jokes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, I have tofu burgers. They're delicious. It takes on the taste of whatever you're cooking it with. If you use the proper seasoning, it can taste great. So, okay, a protein and a salad and
really something to up the appeal for everybody, whatever that means for you. I think that could be any number of things, but maybe I'll pass it to you. I'm sure you have some other thoughts.
There are a number of vegetarian professional athletes and triathletes, so it's absolutely compatible with an athletic, even bodybuilder lifestyle. They're vegetarian bodybuilders.
Now, hold on, Pete Hegseth. Answer the question, will you?
I'm trying to. If you're going to go with plant-based protein sources, you do have to balance them. There are almost no plant-based sources that are complete in and of themselves. So normally you need two things, like say beans and peas would be a good pair. Spinach has a ton of protein in it. In fact, some of the highest protein foods are plant-based, but they tend not to have all of the amino acids. So one advantage of meat is that it has all of the amino acids in one place. Now, if you use dairy, milk and eggs also have a complete palette of amino acids and in balance to each other and highly bioavailable, meaning your body can actually use them. So a lot of the protein in spinach is not easily accessed by your body.
We're running out of time, but I want you both to touch on this if you could. Probiotics, they help you digest, is that correct?
They
I take it that question was too simplistic.
The idea with probiotics is that they change the gut microbiota. I'm unimpressed by and large with probiotics that you would buy over the counter. I think maybe you will get a change, but I don't think you will get a change that's meaningful and lasting. Although I have some family members who would argue with me.
Isn't yogurt a probiotic?
Yogurt can be.
Live yogurt is a probiotic. So if you're going to get yogurt for health, if your goal is to optimize the nutritional quality of your meals with yogurt, then you want yogurt that has only a single ingredient in it, whole milk. And it should say that it has acidophilus culture. And
oh, now I'm back to reading.
No,
I'm back to reading the back of cans.
Actually,
again.
I'll bring you a label right now and show you literally exactly what I mean.
Okay, you better run over there. We're running out of time.
Doing my best.
Now he decides to take a field trip.
That's right. Live yogurt. I mean, you can make yogurt. You can make yogurt if you have live yogurt. You can stir it into some milk and keep it at the right temperature, which is basically lukewarm. And because it's live yogurt, it has live cultures. It'll turn that milk into yogurt just by.
This is from Walmart. It's one of the least expensive. There's your ingredient list right there. That's all that's in here is milk. It's not full of gels and sugars and added flavors and things like that. And then this lower section down here, sorry, let me get my finger there. That's showing you what are the bacteria that's in it. And you might think, well, I don't want bacteria in my yogurt. Sure you do. Every cheese you eat is riddled with bacteria. That's how cheese is made. You apply bacteria to milk. It's also why people who are lactose intolerant can usually eat milk and cheese. Yeah. So you want the simple, plain stuff, and it's got to be live. It's got to have these cultures on it. And there are multiple different ones. They're getting better and better about them because they're getting better at figuring out which ones actually benefit people's metabolism. Now, you were saying you're a little underwhelmed by the evidence for the microbiome.
Not the microbiome, but for probiotics.
Right, their impact on it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
It's sort of what you can do. But if you're going to try to massage your microbiome, and I kind of do, but like you, I'm not sure the evidence is terribly
Yeah.
strong, but that would be the reason to get live culture yogurt. If you get just regular yogurt, the stuff that's all foo-fooed up so it's more palatable, you still get the benefit of a high-quality, balanced protein that's available to people who are lactose intolerant. Even if you can't drink milk, you probably can eat yogurt.
And we talked a little bit about fiber a moment ago. There's also prebiotics, of which fiber is one. And prebiotics is something that supports, the growth of microbiota that you would want in your gut. I think the evidence for that is a little bit stronger. I think that's part of the effect of
All right,
fiber.
very good. That wraps up our show for today. Thank you so much for being our guest. You're very good.
Thank you.
I'm impressed with you. Thank you for watching. I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
And remember, don't die dumb.